All right, let's get some work done. So, the approach I've been taking is actually, yeah. The approach I've been taking is to insert the data that I need before I build the object, versus my last approach where I would then figure out what the data should be. I want to reverse that because that's what's supposed to happen. So I did my file and file group creators yesterday, and I realized there was an issue, not really an issue, but some functionality that I wanted to add, and that's this right here, is adding more data to the subject data set relationship, which is what I have on this screen right now. So if I have a particular subject, not only does it tell me what tables belong to that subject, but also what files belong to that subject. So these same files belong to multiple subjects. My system reference blobs for main, history, archive, and snapshot on my data point, and the same thing for data set. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I can easily attach the data set class family type, realm class family type to it to figure out exactly what I'm looking at, and each data set has a database. So sometimes it's easier to see with a drawing. And that would be, I have this one relationship table where the data set actually goes to a database key. Data set has the RCFT. This is R. So I will have my tables and my files and file groups all located in this one area. Now I can dictate where these actual tables will be stored for the clustered and index. The cluster table for the table itself and the indexes for non-clustered indexes, but more importantly, I have more than one database per unit, which means my data set table should be on main, but also have the history, archive, and snapshot versions. I should actually do archive, snapshot, history, so I can make a word out of it. Call it mash. My mash databases, like potatoes, because Thanksgiving. Anyways, so I'm going to create the data that we're going to need to build these history tables. And all of these archive, history, and snapshot tables are going to look the same. So I was thinking about it and was like, based on my tree, let me get a tree up here for data set. And let's just get a data set table in here on the data sets. Data set type ID equals the data set type ID primary key. And and I want to see the data set name. So when I run my tree, I have these templates and they're tokenized. So when I come in with a specific subject class to dataset relationship, it gives me the templates. And then what I do is I sub out this word for standard, which helps me classify the table itself. You see this turns into one of these. Now in the archive, history, and snapshot, I really don't need these items. Like, I only need one table because they all look the same. However, this is a really awesome pattern that I can bring forward. So I can take this whole kit for my template and attach them to archive history and snapshot. So I have my base and taxonomy, but now I can do, instead of base and taxonomy, I will just have archive and my base and taxonomy tables, because I don't think I'm going to need this particular split, or else I would have to move everything up one, and it doesn't make that much sense to have template up here because we need to figure out the difference between tables and views. So I want to go ahead and let's see, what's YouTube yelling at me for now? Oh, who cares? All right, so I want to go ahead and basically create one of my history tables, and I'm going to use something that, let's see, definition is pretty lightweight. Oh. So for my archive, history, and snapshot tables, I really just want to append what it is. So I would have archive, and it would be joined on, or it would be residing in the archive database. Now, most of this information defines the record, but this is, what's a temporal data structure. So actually don't need any of this stuff. To keep in the pattern of naming, definition underscore archive, it would be definition underscore archive here. That's the primary key. We have who owns it, and then we're going to store the entire record in JSON. So JSON record. Let's see, and we would never want this to be nullable. And we would want times. So we want the date ID. We'll just make this a foreign key. It's not apparent. We want two more times. So date and date time. Now when I store date time, oh, actually I can just do this because this means nothing. When I store dates, I like to work in triplets. Generic date time, not null. And that's because I'm going to be creating this crazy date structure. How my, actually doesn't, yeah, it might matter. How my old date structure looks is in my reference database. Several tables where I can define sequences, and I have these relationships for days of the week, months, years, etc. So this can hold multiple calendars as well as sequences, which essentially are holidays. Different countries, wherever. I actually pulled this data from holidata.net using SQL calling Python. But I want to not only store the date ID so I can traverse between any slice that I need, but to give the most common slices that I use all the time, which would be a date with no time and the exact moment that it did happen. Those two are very important items. So we don't need any of these we're not cleaning history. It's almost immutable. Like this thing happened, that's it. We recorded it. We move on. We don't need any other information. Oh, I can't believe I almost removed that. I do need to know what table this is. So specific data set number will always remain. But am I going to name a history arc or a record or an archive record, give it a description? Like none of that matters. It's really what's the primary key, who owns it, what's the actual data, the date ID back to our dimension, the date without time, the date with time, what the table number is, and the rest of the data. So sometimes I actually put the old ID in here. So I would have definition ID because this helps figure out, instead of opening up each JSON record to figure out what the ID was at the time, it's really helpful to have the primary key as it was. So if I have a definition ID for whatever, when I modify this record, this whole chain is going to be put into a JSON object and stored in here, but I will also keep the primary key moving forward. So I will say that this is an implied primary key because it is a possibility, especially when thinking about archive, that that key no longer exists. So this is what it once was. This is coming from somewhere else. But we know it's from the table. And this is going to help. We're going to keep the same naming conventions, but the data or the columns might change for snapshot and history. So if I go ahead and continue just to build this one table, get everything set up. So the final cluster, let's see, who owns it? I would keep it on the definition ID implied. So this is going to, actually I will move this the other way. So when we think of a cluster index, who owns this data, I want to keep all the ownership together, followed by where it came from, the implied primary key, and finally, do I need date? I don't think so. I think this would be good enough for a cluster. Who owns it and what's the key? Because then all the other information will be attached. We keep our naming conventions the same. This is cluster index, table name on that table, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to remove these for now. Yep. Because I want to actually create all of my come on, where's my brain? I want to create all my indexes via data. I don't want to sit there and add indexes for every single table, so I'm going to define here are the data types that belong in a unique index, clustered index, non-clustered index, and my system will create the rest for me. But I do want to keep the defaults, so I just got to get rid of the things that we don't need, and I want to get rid of specific data set number. Actually, I'm going to have to give this an upper limit because I have to actually program that into the system. So I don't need any of this data, but I have 3 new columns. Actually, I have 3 date columns and a JSON row column. And I just realized table ref definition archive. Yep. This doesn't exist anymore. Oh, 4. All right. So my 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Man, I cannot count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay. Say I want to create a constraint for my JSON record. Its default is going to be null because it does not allow nulls. Null, 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 null. Actually, I could do that for all of them. So let's speed this up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I should be able to format this. Get rid of the white space. And let's do the outer first. There we go. So this is essentially what my archive table is going to look like, along with the defaults. And it will go on the archive reference cluster. Now, do I even have these up? That's main. Okay, so maybe this isn't the best approach right now because I have so much stuff I have to do. I thought I'd be smart and get my archive going so I could start recording how the data is changing, but I still don't have my objects built yet. Oh, so let's just build the objects. Fine. Okay, I want this. Change of plans. We're going to make sure that all of our files exist on every single database we have using our relationship. So if I have, oh, I'm in the wrong database, or the wrong server. There we go. So if I have all this information, I can say, and the data set type ID is in my tree for data set, where I just need the data set type ID, where I am looking for tables, standard, let's say file, is that right? Oh no, file, standard. And secondary. Sweet. There we go. So now, based on my subjects, I can actually get the dataset names that I need. Now, a lot of these are repeating, so let's reduce them. Instead of just distinct and go with it. Let's think about how we're going to be setting this up. So the files belong to the database. So I want to make sure that I have in my JSON payload, since we're avoiding changes to procedures by using an overloadable JSON object. This would be my procedure variables for everything. I'm going to have the JSON payload for right now till I know exactly what I need. I want this to contain my database ID. And we will do system main first. So given an incoming database ID, it is going to try to give me the data sets. So instead of getting the duplicated data, I can just say give me the dataset name where the dataset ID is in. Since this is a subject to dataset relationship, system relationship child primary key from the relationship where I have the subject as a parent. So let me format this code so it's a little bit easier to read. But what's the subject that's coming in? Well, the subject doesn't matter. So, and the parent system relationship parent is in a similar relationship. Except for it's subject to database. So these two parents need to collide, and the child from dataset to database. So then this child would be my incoming parameter of database ID. So database ID is a generic integer. Actually, I should bring this down because the top, all this stuff at the top is going to go away when we create a procedure. So initialize my database ID equals the JSON value in my payload. Nope. At the database ID location. And give me the dataset names for that particular database based on the subjects it has. So these are all the database, or these are all the subjects that exist in this particular database, the tables, the files, and the file groups. So then I can limit that down to say, oh yeah, and make sure that the dataset type ID is of the file variety. Oh, and we're bouncing out. So I have to figure out what subjects are there, and I get all these subjects, so I still get the duplication. So I need to say, just mainly because we're getting, and I will show that, data set database ID, we're getting all of the databases, but we are working with one database, so not only do we need the relationship, because I like my end statements at the bottom, dataset database ID is the incoming database ID also. So when I'm looking at system main, these are the files that I need. And when I come down here, I should be able to say, give me the file group that I need, and it changes. So if I look at not system main, just to make sure this works, let's go archive. We don't have anything specified for archive. Did I do that right? Let's see, no file groups for archive. Do we have files for archive? Interesting. So does that mean this right here? Nice. Three, four, five, and there's my files. Okay. Okay, so it's just my relationship that's all messed up. No problems. Execute. Subject database. Subject would belong on multiple databases. So it's not just that, it's where is my subject to database created? Right here. So it's not this particular one, it's everything that it belongs to. I need all the database IDs from the database table. The database key name is the same as the incoming database key name. Where the database ID is what we're looking at. So a little different. So if we giant circle, man, it's crazy. So if I say the dataset subject belongs in the system database, not only do I need to relate the dataset subject to these 5 tables in this database, and this database 4 file groups, 8 file groups, 8 files, but also because a database is a part of a unit of 4, I need to make sure that all of that stuff is in the same thing. So I am saying this is where its primary residence is. Now make sure that we're just relating the subject to all of the databases in the unit. So for all the databases that exist in that unit, because they'll share the same key name, please relate them. So open the database cursor. Next, from the database cursor into a database ID cursor variable, because I want to maintain that original definition of what this is coming from the payload right here. So I will just have a throwaway data type or throwaway variable. While there are records, let's see if the record does exist. And this is in the if not exists, and that's the cursor, and this is irrelevant. There we go. I want to make sure that I am looking at the cursor itself. The rest of it stays the same. So I get system in. If we look at our tree for the database, we see the database ID. Oh no, database type ID equals database type ID. And I want the database name and database key name. What we're essentially doing is, like I said, dataset belongs in system main. I get system out. Database key name equals system. And my code says, hey, all of these exist in this system area. So come in here, database key name system, all these database IDs, iterate through. Does the relationship exist? If it doesn't, please insert that relationship and close. So this would be for my primary item, which requires this as its payload, and these are optional. Now, since I ran most of my subjects through here, I don't need to do that much. I can just iterate through the subject table where the subject type ID is in its tree. I believe it's dataset table. Yep. And we will stick to these for right now, because this isn't, we're not building that one yet. So I just need these three. Awesome. Database, where the database This key name is from system, and the database type ID is database type ID. I own it. It is a relational database. It's Microsoft SQLs. It's local. And it's main. So database ID 6. Subject ID. Give me the parameters. The database ID, and this is just some ad hoc stuff. I'm not going to keep this. Oh. Should actually put, I should put this in a snippet. Declare name cursor local fast forward for open name fetch next from name sorry, if I'm typing the same thing over and over and over again, why? Why am I doing that? Cursor, let's be local fast forward. There we go. Okay. Okay. Build the payload. The subject ID to be the incoming subject ID, and the database ID, and execute building of the subject. Sweet. Now, crap, back on topic. I finally have my relationship for the archive. First, no data came back here, but now I will be able to, what's this set, 6, 7, 8, 9, 6, 7, 5, okay, 5, 6, 7, 8. Awesome. Sweet. So this is my file or file group creator. This will be my file for now. Overloading this for a file group. It's going to come in and get this data. So I want to basically script the alter statement if it exists. So let me make some sort of visual cut. because above these lines will be my procedure. So help me keep track. Okay. So I need some sequels. So we're going to dynamically execute this. I get this database coming in, so I know what database it is, so I can get my database name. Sweet. I need to see if it exists before I create it. And what is that? Let's go into system main. Sys files. Oh, no. This is named wrong. That's right. It's named database files. Yes. Where dataset name. So, if not exists, from this table where my dataset name, then alter this database. Actually, I should make those tokens too, just because it will be easier. I could pass parameters back and forth, but why? Why? Alter database, add. This will be, I need to add a file to a file group. So I need to add a file group first. File group, dataset name. Sweet. This is my base statement. So that would be file groups. Awesome. Yep. So use whatever database is being passed in. If it doesn't exist in the file groups table for the file group name that I currently have stored, please add it to the database. This is the same name. That's my SQL base. Get the database name, and then for each file that is supposed to be, each file group that is supposed to be within this subject, within any subject that is located in my database, I need you to create. Will I be editing the dataset table? No, I will not. Boom. So set my SQL to execute is a copy of my base. Set my SQL to execute is I need to replace that token for database name with the database name. And I need to do the same thing for the data set. Which which I haven't declared yet, but that is fine. All right, so how would that code look before we execute it? Nice. So we know 5, 6, 7, 8. What about history? Use history if it doesn't exist. Oh, glad I did that because I don't need that since I have my use statement. There we go. If it's not in the current database's file groups. Oh, man. Well, that's why we're testing. There we go. That looks better. And I don't think I have to quote this. We'll figure it out if it fails. All right. So this should actually be everything I need to create the file. Should be renaming. Because this is where it should be. System object creation file group. No, that's what I'll do. Parameters, headers. Requires a database. This procedure checks to see if all of the defined relationship or all the defined file groups exist in the incoming database ID and creates them if they do not. Wait, almost copied the wrong code. So just want to comment my code because this stuff this stuff is available. And I want to make sure that anyone who picks this up can read it and I don't just do what I always do, which is never comment anything. Initialize variables, that should not be there. It's under initialize. This is my actual code. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Get the database name. After I have that, we are going to 1, 2, 3, 4 iterate through data sets. Where 1, 2, 3, 4 for the data set to subject relationship exists in the database to subject relationship for the incoming database ID. And is of the file group dataset realm. File group so another cool thing that I'm going to be doing is I can pull these comments out and put them, run it through, I don't know, some simple React app, so we can see everything documented and hopefully be able to read exactly what's happening in the procedure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. So create a copy of the SQL base. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Replace database name, dataset name. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Execute. Sweet. Should be good enough. Awesome. Just want to double check to make sure my trigger is working. SQL. Yeah, okay. It's not giving my date stamp though. On create. Why is that? Oh, that is why. There we go. Okay. All right. So now I should just be able to iterate through my databases. Yeah. Let's say I want a cursor for database. I am selecting from the database table. Where the database is in my tree of databases, but it has to be on the same server. It's got to be local. MySQL relational. Because if I don't do that, I will be trying to build servers and templates, and I can't do that. And even folders. I need to make sure that it is a local database that I am building. So, params without the output. I am the operator. We don't even have the group table set up because I would stop hard coding one. Never want to hard code a specific ID. But I can't build those yet because I don't have something that builds tables yet. So it's like I'm working on a circle. And I just keep working around the entire circle until I don't need to anymore. All right, for each database, we just have to build the JSON payload. Clear out the object, modify the JSON object. The root database ID should be the database ID that I have not defined yet. refresh my cache. There we go. There we go. Actually, I could just take this. All right. Now, SQL is I hate SQL sometimes. Because some things have to be the first statement, some don't. So, think this is going to work. I don't know. History. We only have our default in log. That's fair. Oh. Ah, you're an idiot, Elric. But I still love you. Boy, that's the syntax. Oh, man. Seriously. Is it really just add file group? There's no alter. I have to do alter add file to file group. So I never remember this stuff. I do this once and walk away. No, that's the correct. Oh my god. Oh my god. Yes. Stupid words. There, got my additional 4. Yes. Yes. Okay. Same thing. Do it again. Instead of file group, it's file. Instead of file groups, it's database files. And instead of this, we'll say add file. To file group. And I have to give it my parameters. So let's steal it. File name. To my file path and file name. To file file group. Where do I get my file name? I mean my file path. Oh, it's incoming, isn't it? Yes. Okay. File path. Dataset name, file path, and file dataset name, file group. Database name, dataset name, file group, which is the same exact thing, except for it is file group plus almost the entire dataset name. Just a different prefix. This takes off FS, this adds FG, and we have our file group name and the file path. I want to see this how work. Replace database name, file path, dataset name, and then the file group location. Rest of the code is essentially the same. What is that doing there? Oh, and concat and replace. Okay. Same thing, database ID, but I need my file path. And what's my file path? What the okay. This is JSON though, isn't it? Isn't it? Boom. Cluster, blob, columnar on history. To file group, reference, index, file name. That is not correct. Ah, that is why. Because you didn't change the key names. Is this file? Awesome. Alter. Because you're still getting file group. You just want file. So you want file. Files, 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 files. File. FS, FS, FG, FS. All right, so that should be good. So technically what we want to be doing is creating almost a kit. And I think I want this as a procedure itself, as a way to enforce what's happening Yes, because I want to make sure that my file groups are created and the files themselves are created, because I'm not really checking to see if file groups are created, and SQL is dumb. It won't just create it for me, but I want it to. So I think I trust this enough to watch it fail or succeed. We don't know. Oh, that's nice. No red text is always, oh, I know that exists. Files in history are now there. Files in snapshot better be there. Awesome. Should have went through the whole thing. Oh, I don't have any subjects attached to data main. I do not. That is awesome. Okay, I definitely want to save this. And I want to do this a tiny bit differently. Let's say I'm going to overload the overload. Set database ID is from the payload at database ID, but in here, and the database ID is the incoming database ID, or I have overloaded it. So I want to run the whole thing, refresh my cache. I want to run the whole thing or a very specific thing. So that'll work for me. So that means I get to keep with the JSON payload and create a top level procedure that will create files and file groups for me. So I'll just do a new one. Procedure, system, object, creation, data, so no, SQL, files, and file groups, code. Parameters, headers, database ID, optional. We'll run all related file group and file relationships and create objects if necessary for all backwards relational Microsoft SQL local databases, optional specific database ID. No, if database ID is defined. Boom. Yeah, I know. It's history. We shouldn't be running it from history anyways. Okay, so now that I've created files, can I go back and start building the thing that I started working with in this giant circle? Let's close my hundreds of tabs. I feel like you could watch somebody program and figure out either how scatterbrained they are or how awesome they are based on how many tabs they have open. As I know when I do web development too, I have 100 tabs open. It's like, Why? Okay. Okay. Actually, I should keep track. So file creator, file group creator. So we'll make sure that I can actually mark this off. Oh, god damn it. Okay. So I do need one for a data set. I guess I could do that just to make sure they do exist. I really want to get my history set up, but I also need to make sure my easier to find types are there. They should be there. So many different things. Hey, if anyone's on right now, out of one of these things, what should I do? You could drive development. Should I dynamically create tables based on the subject information coming in? That's already saved. Should I enforce indexes? Is this really... or something else? No? Okay. I give you guys the option. I'm trying to be interactive. So I'll go table. Probably, jump in to see someone doing this, like, what the hell are they even doing? Alrighty, select star from my column table data point. Dynamic table creation. You got it. So right here, I define based on templates, essentially creating the data. I send it a subject ID like data point. It says you are of the standard RCFT base, and it inserts data and relates data to the appropriate tables and relationships. Essentially just fills my tables. That's all it does. It's doing this a couple days ago. All these three procedures do are fill the data set data point tables. Where's data point? Why am I blind? All right. So now, since I work on, instead of creating an object and filling the tables, I'm filling the tables to create an object, I can essentially just take in a dataset ID. Generic integer, and start building. Where data set, nope, data points, table, data set ID, the incoming data set ID, order by the data point sequence, ascending. Don't lie to me. Oh. Oh my god. I'm gonna do this all day today. I feel it. I feel it. Awesome. So whatever my dataset ID is, I will need the data point name, what it should be, and the data point type ID, because key name abbreviation. Point type. Because my data point type, that's what it'll be. That's my user-defined type. Right. Numeric, yep. And what it's related to. All right, so for each column, get the abbreviation. That will give me column something, but it won't give me a default. And that will be the next thing, default enforcers, and that means nothing can be nullable or not nullable. Interesting. Let's see if I can deduce based on my families. Well, I don't want any of these nullable. I don't want this nullable, but these can be. I don't want these nullable, these can be. So unfortunately, I have an exception before. Frickin' circles, man. So I have one exception I have to program, which is if system, you cannot be nullable, which makes sense. We don't want any of these. Oh, we don't care about this one though. All right. Alrighty. Cursor local fast forward dataset. Dataset cursor. Will I be modifying this table? I will not. So local fast forward is okay. What do I want? This should be data point. I do want to order it because that's the sequence. Alrighty. So let's just do this for now. Print, create, table, blah. Since I'm setting this, if this comes back null, it'll keep the previous cursor's iterations value, and we don't want that. But let's just see what this looks like now. abbreviation, and I gotta give it a good data set ID though. Because we want one that actually works. Let's do system realm. That'll be incoming. Primary key, tenant ID, cluster. Okay, so I have to attach my definition. Do I have my definition? In the proper order. Since I have this created, I can actually just do this to make sure we're lining up appropriately. Now it's very important that some of these can be nullable and some of them cannot. We never want these nullable. I never want a name nullable, but it's a little mix and match. So I think the best way to do that, instead of creating this exception list, is to actually start working on almost the same pattern I'm going to use to dynamically create whatchamacallits, everything else, because that's a definition. So I need to have specific system definitions. These definitions are important to the system. Alright, and in these system definitions, we're going to have a class of them that deal with objects. But not the object naming, even though I committed it. It's going to be object construction. So for these object construction classes, what is this family? 2. What should this family be? Well, it's supposed to be defaults, so these are a type of constraint. This definition is for constraints. That's 3. They are default constraints. So this definition controls default constraints. And instead of having like a key name of system, object construction, constraint, default constraint, I'm just going to have default. Because under the constraint context, a default is a default. 19. So under 19, what should we have? Well, for now we have nullable. Nullable defaults, or they're not constraints, they're not defaults. Damn it. They are column modifiers. Nullable. Defaults are different. Not nullable. Constraints, data point, null. Finds this definition controls what data point types are nullable. Because as we can see, we don't want, some of these can be nullable, they don't matter. Some of these can't. Unfortunately, because these are considered descriptor columns, I can't just say, oh yeah, and the family is not descriptor, because we have one exception. So because of this exception, we're just going to define them like this. So I can get my trusty favorite other tool in the world, Sheets. Close all this crap down and say, now we have to define another relationship because we work in a pattern. We have all these relationships and none of them really represent what we're trying to do. So we have to create a new one. I know. We're going to link a definition to a data point type. So this is meant to relate definitions to data point types. Okay, 7 is my end. Is it a functional relationship? I mean, not really. It's just a normal relationship, right? Actually, no, it is functional, because if I don't define my nulls correctly, then we're going to have problems. So ends in 6, family. Yeah, it represents specific objects, which are the data points themselves, or the, that's arguable. 8. So definition, the data point type, functional object. Definition, the data point type. What type? What type? I'll just be specific. Nullable fields. This relationship controls what data point type as what nullable, not nullable definition. (1008). All right, now finally, we just have to create the relationship records, and I'll just grab any one of these, paste it up here. But I have to get my data point types. And I just want the data point type ID, data point type, specific data set number, and the key name so I can read it, and I'll just relate it as we go along because it doesn't really matter. Crap. They're too low. 13 or 19? 13. Okay. Okay. All right. So I named it definition to data point type, and I know by this 10008 is my type ID, primary key, tenant, type ID, what table number the relationship table is, the ID for the definition, and the definition specific data set number, the ID for the data point type, its dataset number. There we go. So I can just kind of go through and say what do I want is nullable and what do I want is not nullable. So let's do what's nullable first. Abbreviations are, cleaning flags are not, column headers and descriptions are, display orders are, foreign keys are not, foreign key parents are not, key names are nullable, names are not, primary keys are definitely not nullable. These are implied version, but we don't always need to clean something immediately, so this is nullable. And you don't really need a sequence. Oh, you assuredly need these. Without these, none of our relationships would work. You need to be a classification. You need to have an owner. You need to be trusted or not. And this crap has nothing to do with columns themselves. So just to go through it again, what's not nullable? My flags. Oh. My foreign keys. The name of the record. Other flags. Wait, did I do this backwards? Gosh darn it. Oh, man. No. Then why not nullable? Oh, man. I'm losing it today. I just flip them right here. Nullable. I just flipped them right here. That's all. It's really thrown me off. Nullable. Not nullable. Okay, that just threw me off. Day after a holiday where you eat all of the food. Never good to program after that. Alright. 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 Definition, key name. System, relationship, type ID, for definition to data point. System. For the relationship. Because I'm having such an amazing time typing. I should stop typing and just start replacing stuff. Place tabs. Start with, I can't do end because it wasn't highlighted. That's my data point. I get my definition key name. Alright, let's clear out my definition key name. Then get my definition key name. From the definition select table where the definition ID is in our system relationship table. It is the primary key of the parent in definition to parent child, parent implied, where the type ID is that type ID. And the child is what we're currently looking at. So that should give me a simple if statement of if the definition key name is not nullable, then 1. No, not nullable, then null, else not null. Liar. Getting too long there. Sweet. So I don't think there will be any other item. All right. So we will have 3 pieces in our script: the data point name, the data point, let's just call it data type, the nullable flag. In between the nullable flag, we have to say identity, which is simple. If it's a primary key, then that's what it is. And I think that's it on the primary piece of the table creation. So SQL we want our base to be. We want to use a database name because a table has to be the first object or the first thing. We have to dynamically execute it. We want to make sure that it does not exist. Select one from, since we're using the database name, it will just be right. Yeah. Where table name is equal to our dataset name. So if it doesn't exist, we do want to create it. Else, it doesn't really matter what we do. So in here, we will have our dataset name. We will have our columns. They're going to have everything attached to it, but we will have 2 pieces. We will have our constraint. I'm just take out all these options because I don't care about them right now. So that is the table proper, which ends here. So we will have our columns, and we will have our actual primary key, non-clustered. So we don't want to cluster on our primary key because it doesn't provide us with anything that's beneficial. It's creating a tree where there's only one top node forever. These options are automatically created by default. So we do have to figure out what the file group is for our index, because it's a non-clustered item, so it goes on an index file group, but a clustered index is the table, so it has to belong on the cluster. Create, name, columns, constraint, non-clustered, primary key. File group, execute. All right. I just want to make sure I get all my tokens in one place so I don't forget something. Already have dataset name and the file group. Just got to think about where will we be actually creating the object itself. Does this get called on a per object basis? Do I have to supply it with a subject ID? Going backwards, because of our relationship, actually, we don't need to. We can look at it as an isolated item, because if we have the dataset ID incoming, then we should have the subject to dataset functional object dependency for integrity. So I can pull the subject and pull the file from it. I shouldn't shorthand anything. But that's pretty... we only need to do that once. So we'll say dataset name for the file group of index is the dataset name dataset table, where a lot of information from the dataset ID. So we will need the database ID. So our file groups match. Is that it? Now we'll want the dataset name for our create table script. And we can get the dataset name from the dataset table where the database ID matches the table we're actually trying to create, and the dataset ID for this file is in our integrity relationship for the subject dataset. System relationship primary key child. System relationship type ID. What's the parent for the subject? Oh, this is crazy. And the parent, which is a subject, is in the same exact query for the data set, which is the incoming table that we're trying to create. And that, no, that's reversed. Trust me. I mean, don't. I don't know. But maybe. All right. All right. All right. Subject to data set. I have a data set that I want to create, and I'm looking for a file. The subject to data set relationship. So that means in my relationship table, I will have a subject and a data set. Both of these will contain the things I want. So if I'm coming in with my data set ID, I will get a subject that I can go back in to get the file, but I want to make sure that the databases match. So that works. Give me the dataset in the same database where the subject, where the dataset is a part of the subject relationship, where the subject also belongs to the same subject that I'm trying to create. Bam! Makes sense. It's not confusing at all. Dataset name. Dataset name. File group. Database ID. We'll create one more for cluster because it's almost done. This just gets me data sets, but not a specific one. A specific type of data set. The one where it's a part of the file group realm of the index. Makes perfect sense. Because what would be the difference for the cluster? I think it's called clustered. Yeah. Nice. Let's print those out and see if they did anything. Print the data set, cluster, and index. Yes. Wait, is that backwards? Yes. Yes. Yes, that worked. I don't know how, but it did. I do know how. Just connect the dots. Alright, so got that one. Primary key should be pretty easy. Technically got these two. I just need to actually get the database name. So let's make a cut and database name. Yeah, what was the thing I said? Oh, the primary key. I should put it up here. Primary key. So that's not a data set at all. It's a data point. Let's get rid of this print statement. It's messing things up. All right, go through. We're gonna get the type ID. That's how we normally build things. So we'll say, hey, if the data point, where am I getting that? I want the key name. Because we only want to use key names in our code. So if my key name is primary key, what? Well, I just put data point key name. Sure did. If the data point key name is primary key, then set the data point type, or data point name for primary key is the current data point name. So that should get us that for our primary key index. We still have to do that same kind of count. So I'm actually going to create one more SQL script instead of base. I will say they are columns, but I will spell that correctly, I think. Yes. So my columns need to be initialized as an empty string. So now I iterate through and start building them. Set my columns equals concat what my columns are right now, which is empty, plus the data point name, space, the let's do just to make it look a little better. The data type, space, if the data point type, key name is primary key, then identity 1, else don't do anything. Space just because, yeah. If the definition is nullable, then add my null, and finally a comma. But when we are finished, let's make sure that we get everything except the last comma. So my execute statement should be my base, where I can take my execute statement and replace it multiple times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are all be variables, so let's just do this. These will all be the same. Oh, there's some tabs in there. Name gets replaced, data set name gets replaced, the SQL columns, that's replaced, the data point name for the primary key is replaced, the data set name for the index, and the data set name for the file group cluster. And what does it look like? Nothing. Because which one did we not get? I swear okay. Looks like it worked. data-driven table creation. All right, I do want to actually attach the schema to that because we should. So now I should be able to send it any sort of data set ID, and it will create the table if the table doesn't exist already. So I might actually be able to test that out completely here in a few moments. Let's just take the SQL file1 SQL table. So this procedure takes in the dataset ID and attempts to create the table, its database. Now I just copy all of this. Table, okay. At dataset ID is incoming. Because it is from the JSON value of the JSON payload for dataset ID. Initialize actual code. Relationship, and execute. Boom. So if I have this creation right here, this creates all of the necessary objects I need and their relationships for, no, that's my relationship for databases. Creates the data set, the relationship, and then fills in the data points. And this will be for the template. But right here, I'll have my actual table. So if I wanted to create my table, I would already have the dataset ID in my payload. So I wouldn't need to modify it. And I would already know who I'm operating under. So that should do both. So, do I have anything that I can create that I don't have yet? What else is part of the system? Aside from databases, data points, data sets, we're trying to build information schema. So maybe we can see what is under information schema. From info, what do we have? I mean, everything. Well, that's already what we have. Routines are just processes. Domains are just data point types. Views are data sets. Tables are data sets. We have a sequence, but we only have one. Constraints are definitions. So we don't have anything else I can model in the system. Message. Error messages. Specifically for the system. Alrighty. So if I create a new subject called message, and this is basically going to have a list of messages. We can fill with SQL messages, but maybe I want my own custom messages for the system itself. So I want to make sure I have that. So 15, and it will exist on system main, so I believe that is database ID 6. Yep. So to fill the data and create the tables, I should be able to call this procedure, which requires just a subject ID and a database ID. Messages don't really have a parent because they're in the system. So, yeah, it works for me. Execute. Create the subject. I am operating. Just program my JSON in here. It's no big deal. That's my subject ID. That's my database ID, which is 6, and I forgot this one. I'm gonna guess. I was wrong. Subject ID, database ID, and my response. Well, nothing blew up. That's always a benefit. So if I refresh, do I see messages tables, realm, class, family, type? I don't. Why is that? Oh, you know why that is? Because I didn't save it. LMNOP, no. Nope. Weird. I'm not even getting down that far. Or it's printing out and can't find anything. This crappy part is able to see it. Print, execute, table, create. Execute, table, create. Something is absent. So what is it? Got so much crap open. Okay then. Gets my columns in my primary key, but it can't find the file groups. However, it belongs to the appropriate file group. This data set. Does that just mean that we can't assume that the relationship exists? So we need to make sure, based on the subject, that they exist. Just use this. So we have to ensure the file groups and files exist for our new subject. This would be really interesting. Oh. Nope. Oh, because I commented it out. God. Elric. So this is the path. When creating new subject, we have to ensure that the file groups and files are created before we create the subject itself. Yeah. Multiple identity columns specified for realm. It's trying to run the realm 3 times. Why is that? message realm. Oh. What the shit? Database ID, yep. 615. Database name 15. Data point name for this dataset ID. Oh, that's not the dataset. It's a subject, not the dataset. Interesting. And only realm got created. So why is that? Why is that? It's got to be within the subject. All right, we have subject. Subject's coming in. Dataset. Comes down here. Relates all the databases together. Dataset template. Creates it. So this would be realm. Begin. Create it. Get the dataset ID out. Subject's not related. Go ahead and relate it. But this dataset ID is one of our 5 tables. And modify the payload. Call the data point. This will fill out all of our system data. Our dataset ID. That would be our template. Oh man. Oh, how long have I been? Hours. Okay, I'm gonna grab some food. I will be right back. I have to think about this problem. It seems, for some reason, based on the data I'm getting, this isn't supposed to be happening. So my data that I'm putting in the table before I create the table is somehow recognizing, it's like processing the same table 3 times, but it knows it's changing. That's why when I'm running this procedure, I get the same can't create realm table. I'll do it again. It's a, wait, what the hell? Oh, because I'm not, yeah, not executing it. So it's trying to create the realm 3 times, but it should be overriding the data set. So I just gotta mess around, but I'm gonna grab some food because I haven't eaten at all today. I'm not thinking right. So thanks everyone for checking out this stream and getting me going in the right direction. I do want to create tables at least by the end of today or tomorrow, SQL Saturdays. But thanks again all, and I will see you soon.